All right. Welcome everybody to the March 26th meeting of the Kensington Police Protection and Community Services District. President Chris Deppy, and I'll now call roll. Director Badavi.
Here.
Director Sherswat.
Here.
Director Natoli.
Here.
Director Hasai.
Here.
Great. And first, I want to assure everybody that we understand this online meeting format is really not ideal. Obviously, the circumstances are pretty unusual and extraordinary. But we tried to put, in fact, we did put items on this agenda, only things that really were necessary. Anything that didn't have to be in a meeting like this, we were trying to work out or postpone or whatever. But we really had some important business to take care of. And so that's why we're doing this. Second, this is the first time we're doing a meeting like this. We had the staff and I had a trial session last night. We just had about a half-hour workshop. So I think we got most of the bugs worked out, but I'm sure it won't be perfect. So just please bear with us. So I will now allow general public comment on items. I'm sorry, let me tell you how it works. If you want to speak, you need to raise your hand. And to raise your hand, you either click that little button at the bottom center of your screen, or you do *6 on your phone. And once you raise your hand, I'll let people talk. I don't see the order that they raise them in, so I'm just going to go down the list of what I've got. And that'll be true for the general public comment and also for the agenda item comments. So now this is the place where the general public can comment on items that are within the jurisdiction of our district, but not on the agenda. And I see Marilyn. I'm going to let her talk first. All right, Marilyn, are you? No, Lynn's talking. Is that right, Lynn?
I'm sorry, I thought you asked for Marilyn.
Well, go ahead.
How many attendees are there? Usually an attendee can look around the room and know both the count and the names of the attendees if one's familiar with residents in the community.
I guess we can say there's 20 at least right now.
Well, there's 21, but it's a number that comes and goes. Some people come, some people leave. It's just like a regular room. So that's
so 21 attendees
right now.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay. Now I'm going to try to unmute Marilyn. All right, Marilyn, go ahead. Marilyn? Hello, Marilyn. All right, what's going on here? All right, well, I'm going to mute Marilyn. And Pat Gillette, looks like you can talk.
I just have a question. I'm sorry, this is an operational question. Can you see us?
No, I cannot.
Because I wondered if when people spoke, it would be, I mean, when I use Zoom, you can see the other people. So I haven't ever had it where you can't see who's talking. But that might be something to think about if we have to do this again. I know it's all new technology for people, but that would be nice.
Yeah, I was surprised that we couldn't see you either, but it must be the way it's set up. I'm not quite sure why.
Okay, no problem. I don't want you to see me. I got a t-shirt on.
Oh, God.
Please remember to unraise your hand when you're done raising your hand.
And Chris, I'm not sure if all the attendees are on mute or not. You might want to just check your settings.
That's what I am checking right now. Everybody should be muted now except, and people just come and go, and I'm going to mute Pat back, okay. It's the list jumps around, so sometimes I'll be clicking on mute and then the person will jump out under me and someone else will take their place. So I'm going to try Marilyn again. She's got her hand up. Let's try this. Marilyn? Marilyn? That's not working. All right, we're going to mute her again. All right, so I think then we should go to the next item on the agenda, which is board staff communication. Tony, do you want to give your general manager report?
My report consists of an update on the community center, and I received an update from Glass and Associates and Farhad, and I've included them as attachments. The community center is nearly complete per the message from Bill Glass. I checked on maybe a specific date that it would be completed, and their best case scenario is next week or in a week. That's the best case scenario. They are having some slow installation related to the AT&T. So we probably should give them some latitude, but the important message here is that it's nearly completed. And the other item is the current status of the financial, of the expenditures and the contingency for the project. And you can see from that there are, the balance remaining is 396,000, and there still remains a contingency of 66,000. So the project seems to be coming in on budget and is nearly complete.
And can you talk about the shades for the nano wall?
I cannot, maybe I can get some help from Rochelle or Sylvia on that.
What do you want to know?
Well, it mentions that the shades will come in later in the general manager report.
Yeah, they had to be ordered. The company used to include them inside of the windows, and they stopped doing that. So they had to outsource, find a new source for the shade to install it. And
okay.
I don't have a date though.
Okay, all right. Any board members have questions about that? No? Okay. So now we'll go to board of directors, board comments. Cyrus, any board?
Actually, I think David Bergen wants to ask a question.
All right. David?
Yes, thank you. Two questions, actually. It was mentioned that AT&T is involved, and I thought that we were going to get Comcast to do the Wi-Fi interface. And the second,
I can answer that. I can. Oh yes.
I have one more question while I'm still on, and that is, ASG was doing the resetup of the AV system, and is that happening?
That's on the agenda later.
Oh, it is? Okay, didn't realize that. Thank you very much.
Okay.
And as far as for AT&T and Comcast, Comcast will be the internet provider, and Steve has already taken care of that. And AT&T is currently, they were there today. I've been coordinating with Dwayne that they had issues with not being able to find the line, and so they had to identify the line and then coordinate with Dwayne. So today they were there, so I'm hopeful that that was taken care of, and that's for the fire alarm and for the payphone, because the payphone stopped, it wasn't working right recently. So that's the status of the phones there and the Comcast.
So are you, Catherine, this is Eileen, is Comcast going to do the internet so we don't need Hughes anymore?
That's correct. And actually I just was on the phone with Hughes yesterday, and hopefully they're going to credit us from November forward. because in November, somebody else was taking care of it and tried calling and canceling it, I guess. So, and they only allow it to be on hold for 6 months. Otherwise, you have to cancel the service. So since somebody had tried to cancel it in November, I'm hopeful that they'll give us a credit for that. And it is canceled going forward.
Great, thank you.
We've got one more person that wants to ask a question. Lynn?
Yes, what line are you using?
I'm sorry, what do you mean?
So is this the line that's associated with the phone inside the community center, or is this connected to the line out front that's part of the school district?
I don't know the specifics as to the line. I know there are 10 lines out there that they were working with to identify. So that was Dwayne and Farhat that were working on that.
So is this out in front of the community center?
I believe so, yes.
Those lines don't belong to the services district. Did you get permission from the school district to use those?
I wasn't aware of that. I was just brought into this about a week and a half ago when the lines weren't working. So I can look into that and see what, I believe that a new line was brought in though. So we're actually paying for a new line. And I believe that it came from the line that goes to the payphone.
I believe that Andrea looked into this a long time ago. And
Lynn, we'll look into that. Thank you. Okay, let me say, Michelle, wait a second. There you go, Michelle.
All right. There is a dedicated line that goes to the payphone that belongs already. It was a third-party provider but associated with AT&T. We have a line that's not out in front of the community center. It runs around the back. I know exactly where it runs in and connects itself. If there's enough room on that line, AT&T would be able to tell us. They may have run both the dedicated fire alarm and the payphone on the same line. Otherwise, they would have run another line alongside of the line that runs behind the community center. It starts in the back corner. Unfortunately, it was exactly opposite where we wanted it for the fire alarm, but it's not anything to do with the school district. You don't need to look into it, Catherine. I know it's the line that runs around behind the back.
Great, thank you.
Sure.
All right, so director comments, Cyrus, or Director Madavi, sorry.
No, I'm good.
No comments, Rochelle? Nope, I say you're muted. Try to wait a second, there you go.
All right. Oh, and let me unraise my hand here. Excuse me. Only comment is, of course, because of the continued situation with the self-quarantining, we will be delaying opening the community center after its renovation until we get the all clear that public group meetings are acceptable. So unfortunately, that looks to be probably at least into May right now. So just so everyone knows. And we ask people to respect the boundaries of the community center. The fencing will remain in place.
Eileen, any comments?
No.
Sylvia?
No, thanks.
No comments at this time. Well, that concludes my comments and presentation.
Okay. I just have one comment. Rochelle and I, Steve and Ricky, well, it's been a while. It's time sort of is hard to calculate these days, but it was a while ago that Rochelle and I and Ricky met with RDC, the architects, to talk about fitting both departments into the public safety building. And it was a really productive, good meeting. I don't have any concrete results to report, but it was encouraging, and we're looking forward to having more meetings, when we can, of course. But it was a good meeting. Let's just put it that way. And hopefully we'll have some more progress reports in the future. All right, so I think we should move on to the actual first agenda item, which is approve the contract extension for interim chief of police services with Contra Costa County Sheriff's Office, June 30th, 2020. Who wants to give the agenda report? Tony?
Yes, this item it relates to extending the contract for interim chief of police Steve Simpkins for 2 months through the end of December. In October, the board did approve a contract with Contra Costa County and the Sheriff's Department at a monthly charge of $35,000 for these services. You recall that the condition that the sheriff had was that the district had to pay the full board, including benefits, for the cost of the captain. He has worked here for about 5 months currently, and the contract will expire in April. And so his work has been exemplary in Kensington. And I included a list of accomplishments that the police chief has completed in these few months that he's been an interim. And they include items in the categories of technology and infrastructure, community engagement, police operations, internal efficiency, and leadership. He has really brought the police department together, and in many ways, even the community. He's received a lot of compliments that I've heard from community members who volunteered comments to me. And I think part of having a chief who has these skills is to use them as much as possible and extend them as much as possible. And the longer that he's able to stay, the larger the possibility that they can become institutionalized in the department. Now we know we can't have him for beyond that period of time, and we have started a recruitment process and have a successor going through a possible successor going through a background process. And this candidate is subject to this PERS 960 plan. I did include a notation here that because of the COVID-19 pandemic, the governor has lifted the restriction on retired annuitant workers, and also this month, CalPERS suspended the 960 hours limitation. But this is an ever-changing situation, and a week from now or 2 weeks from now, it could change again. But this is the current status of the situation, and our recommendation is that we do extend this for, and also given the current emergency that we're facing, this would not be an ideal time to change police chiefs. So our recommendation is to extend this contract for the period of time remaining to the end of June, and the sheriff has consented to that proposal.
All right, what I'd like to do is just see if any board members require clarification or ask questions. Then we'll let the public comment, and then the board members can weigh in on this. So any board members have questions to clarify this issue?
I think she's muted. No, you're not. Yeah, she's muted.
So you should be able to unmute yourself, but I'll unmute you.
Thanks.
Do you have any comments?
I just wanted to ask about the fiscal implications of this for the rest of the annual budget.
Tony?
Yes, so we included a worksheet that projects the cost of this contract. It's in small writing, but it does indicate the Kensington Police District's salary projection with Chief Simpkins, and you can see through June 30th there would be a budget surplus, even if his contract is extended.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, that's great. Thanks.
All right, so I'll take public comments now on this. Anybody who wants to give a comment, please raise their hand. I'm going to let the hands raise first before I start clicking people because the names keep moving around. All right. This will hopefully work. I believe, Pat, you're on.
Hi, I just wanted to, this is Pat Gillette. I just wanted to reaffirm what Tony just said. I think that Chief Simpkins has done a fabulous job of sort of showing what it's like to have a professional police chief in charge of our officers, and the relationships formed with the community have been quite strong as well. So I wholly endorse the idea of keeping him on for another, or as long as we can have him, and hope the board will do that. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mark, let's see if this works.
Can you hear me?
Yep, you're on.
I would concur with Pat, and I think the chief, who I've not met yet, but from just observing the police work around Kensington, and I used to work in media, he's a very, very fine police chief. So I'm very, very advocational of having him stay on for as long as we can have him as well. Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, and let's see if I can get this. Lynn, you should be talking.
Wonderful. I've met Chief Simpkins. I have been thoroughly impressed. He is a consummate professional, and I thoroughly support the board continuing his contract.
All right, thank you. And let's see, looks like Meryl wants to talk. Let's see if I can get her on. Trying to unmute Meryl now. Meryl, if you've muted yourself, you should unmute yourself.
Oh, yeah. Okay, sorry. Yeah, I agree with everything about Chief Simpkins. We're very lucky to have him. My only question is this interim person the person that Chief Simpkins recommended? To go on after June into January.
I'll be glad to answer that question. I actually gave the assignment of recruiting his successor to the chief because we knew we only could keep him for a limited time period. So he's the one that recruited this particular candidate and recommends him to the community as a successor. And I've met with him, and he has a very strong reputation in police chief organizations. And so we'll have to wait till the background process is completed before we can make any decisions on that.
Okay, thanks very much. I think this is a great direction for the town.
All right, thank you. Well, it looks like that's all public comments. So director comments before we propose a motion. Cyrus?
Well, so yeah, I very much want to emphasize again the importance of keeping consistency in these uncertain times. And like, I sort of echo what all the residents have said, like the chief has done an excellent job around town. I've run into him on several occasions, and he's really shown like, what the police can do in a good way.
Thank you. Michelle? No? Nothing? Wait a second. Why is that? I'm trying to. Well, you're okay, Michelle? I can't get you unmuted.
Yes, I'm sorry, I muted myself. No, it's fine. No comments.
Eileen? Where is Eileen? Did we lose Eileen? No, Eileen, I can't see you, so I'm going to try to unmute you, but I can't see you, so I can't tell if you don't want to talk or you can't talk. So if you don't want to talk, you should probably just say so, because otherwise it's just a black hole there. Well, she doesn't have her hand raised. She's muted. All right, well, Sylvia.
Oh, okay. No, you had muted me and I couldn't talk because I was muted by you, and that was the problem. No, I thought Steve was an excellent candidate when he came up, and I fully support extending him. So that's great.
And Sylvia?
Yes, I will echo that I have been very pleased with what Chief Simpkins has been able to do with his leadership in the department and the community, and I support his extension.
Thank you. Well, I think he's also done a great job, and we've developed a pretty good working relationship. He's easy to talk to. We've had some good, frank discussions, and I appreciate that. He hired a traffic guy, so of course I'm gonna be happy with that. And I think even, I don't want to say more important, but I really agree with the notion that this is not a time to change direction. It's we really need to have consistency in the department and in the force, and beyond the fact that I think he's done a really good job, we really need to keep things as the way they are now. So I support it as well. So do I have a motion to approve the contract extension?
I will make a motion that we approve the extension of the contract for interim chief Steve Simpkins.
I will second.
I should make a clarification, extension through June 30th, 2020, right?
Correct.
Okay. All right, I'll call roll. Dr. Madavi?
Aye.
Director Shar-Swab? Oh, you gotta unmute yourself. Let me see here. There you go.
Aye. Yes.
Okay, Director Natoli?
Yes.
Then Director Asai?
Aye.
And I vote aye, so that passes 5-0. So welcome, Steve. You're with us for a couple more months, at least. All right, thank you. All right, the next item is approved funding for Advanced System Group LLC to reinstall existing AV equipment in the community center. Tony, could you introduce this?
Yes, this is to install a new audiovisual equipment. Well, actually the existing audiovisual equipment in the community center. And the general manager's authority is $5,000, and this work is a little more than $6,000. So that's why it's being brought before the board. I've already approved the design work. That was the first part of it. Project management design services for $1,000. So the remaining part is just simply the installation of the existing equipment for $4,680. But since this is being presented to the board, we're recommending approval of the entire amount of $6,040.
And this was new for or wasn't planned, or it wasn't, I guess, can you explain why it's not part of the original contract?
It was part of the original contract, but when the consultant showed up, the work was done, the wiring was a little different than expected. They needed some redesign of the wiring, and that's what the $1,000 was for design services. But the actual installation of the work was not part of the construction of the project. So that's covered completely by the district, independent of the construction work.
Okay. Any other board questions on this? All right. Any public comments on this item? Want to wait a second to see if anybody raise their hands? Oh.
We have one.
Yes, Lisa. Hopefully this is really okay. Lisa, I believe. Can you unmute yourself? There you go.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah, just one quick question. Is this considered part of the total construction project and put into the total change order items that are indicated in the other chart, or is this beyond that in some way?
This is independent of those items. This is between the district and the consultant who is installing the equipment.
So it's over and above the construction estimate as shown?
That's correct.
For the building. Okay, thank you.
Just gonna wait a second, make sure no one else raises their hand. All right. Any discussion? Any other comments on the board? All right, do I hear
Actually, Chris, I do have one question, and maybe this is, maybe David Bergen might know the answer. We seem to have some problems in the past with the video working. Will some of this rewiring help correct some of those problems that we've had in the past?
Tony, do you know the answer to that? I suspect that the problem is with the equipment, not with the wiring. So I would expect that this wouldn't have anything to do with video problems.
I think you're correct. I think it has to do with the equipment.
Right.
The problems have not been severe. There have been a number of problems, and the frequency has been higher than anticipated. But the solutions to the problems have been relatively simple in most cases. So now that we have a better handle in history with this equipment, there's a good chance that it will not continue into the future, but it really is unknown.
Okay, thank you.
Rochelle, did you have a question?
No, I was just going to comment that, so this, what happened was KCK did have some funds appropriated in their initial bid for AV work, but the architect stipulated that probably what we would really like is something a little bit more extensive at this time, as we had the walls open and the ability to put electrical exactly where we needed it. That's where the upcharges come. That's where the ASG design comes in. And as to improvements, I hope, because we're going to have some improvement in equipment, that it will be better, but we are still in a cinder block building. So some of the wireless issues that we had may continue.
Does David want to add anything? He still has his hand up.
Let me unmute him. All right, David, there you go.
Okay, ASG is really the people who have to install the equipment. And in this case, they're really reinstalling what they installed the first time around. I don't think it's going to make any difference in terms of reliability, but it might. I think towards the end, we figured out what the problems were and we're able to work around them. So I'm very pleased that ASG will be doing this, assuming you guys vote for it. Thank you very much.
Thanks, David.
Right.
I wanted to also add that I've spoken to the company president and the person who's handling the design, and they are committed to the district to provide the best service and address these previous problems. So there's a commitment from the company.
Great. All right, anybody have a motion? Do I hear a motion?
I will make the motion that we authorize the general manager and approve the contract with ASG for the reinstallation of the equipment.
I'll second that motion.
All right, Director Madavi?
Present.
Director Sharaswat?
Aye.
Director Natoli?
Aye.
The Director Asai?
Aye.
And I vote yes. So it's 4-0 with 1 present. All right, item 3. Consider actions related to increasing the general manager's spending authority during a state of emergency as declared by the governor or the county. There's 2 parts to this. A, grant the general manager spending authority up to $20,000 if the interests of the district require an expenditure in excess of his usual $5,000 limit before the board can convene a meeting. And B, authorize general manager expenditures in excess of $20,000 with the concurrence of the president and vice president of the board if the interests of the district require an expenditure in excess of his usual $5,000 limit before board can convene a meeting. So Tony, Tony Rand, who's a better person to talk about this?
Well, Anne or I can speak to this.
Why don't you start?
I could start and Anne could add to the presentation, but basically that on the last item with ASG, the spending limit was exceeded by $1,000, and in general, $20,000 is a more typical spending authority that you find in local government. Kensington is a small district. The 5,000, however, has led to these kinds of agenda items periodically. And then there are some items that need to be done quickly, and especially now with the state of emergency, this calls attention to the fact that we may need to spend money without having to convene a board meeting, and to give some additional authority to the general manager to allow them to do that when the need arises. So Anne would probably have some additional comments to that.
Yeah, yes, I do. A month ago, this would have seemed a rather catastrophic step, but we have reason to believe now that there's going to be significant illness fairly widespread throughout the community. And that may make it difficult to convene a board meeting or to get an agenda together, a quorum together. In the meantime, district business has to continue to the extent that it can. We have services to provide. So I, in large part, was motivated to draft this report to make sure that Tony, in conjunction with the president and vice president for the more expensive items, could keep the district of the business going if need be before we could convene a meeting of the full board. So these powers would only be executed if it's not possible to convene that meeting. I note that the written agenda report also covers the appointment of a general manager. As I believe you know, there's a situation that has arisen where PERS initially sent us a letter saying that Tony had to stop work for the district by the end of the month. Now there's a circular saying that they're relaxing their requirements or their restrictions on retiree employment. We don't have anything in writing that clarifies how that applies to Tony. We don't have anything that really gives us assurance, and that state of emergency on which the circular is predicated could be lifted at very short notice. So for all of these reasons, I recommend that in addition to the spending authority that Tony mentioned, that we also, number one, authorize the retention of Bill Lindsay as an interim general manager. And if the need arises to appoint another general manager before the board can convene a meeting, authorize the president and vice president to appoint another individual as general manager for a maximum of 2 months at a salary equivalent to that paid to Mr. Lindsay. And with that, I will take any questions on either item 3 or item 4.
So are you recommending that item 3 and 4 be rolled into one resolution, or are you just talking about item 3 and 4?
I would recommend 2 separate motions, but since there was one written agenda report, I thought it reasonable to, in my oral report, address them both.
Okay, great. All right.
I think there are 3 motions on the table. One is to do with the GM stuff, and then 2 for the authorizations, at least how the agenda is written.
However the board wishes to do it.
Yeah, I would say that let's take item 3 as one agenda item, if possible.
Sure.
And item 4 will be a separate item. So let's take item 3 right now. Does anybody have any board questions on item 3?
Well, I guess I was wondering, so when you're defining interests of the district, is that just for like general spending or for like emergency or public safety spending as needed in this state of emergency?
Well, so the board can refine this as it wishes, but let me tell you what my thinking was. We've still got a public works project underway. If we delay any construction of that because we need to say, have this installation agreement, that could cost the district more money in the long term. So if we can't get the board to approve it, in this case we did, but if something else like that happens, then the district ends up having to spend more money because of the delay. So that's why I use the term if the interests of the district require it.
I thought the Public Work Authority was separated because like for everything at the community center, we'd already given some sort of different dispensation for like
but this was not part of that contract and that project. It actually fell outside of that scope.
That's correct. It's a separate contract.
I mean, it technically falls within the scope of the community center, but yeah.
Well, I would not want to authorize a $6,000 agreement that goes over the general manager's usual spending authority without either approval by the board or some measure expanding his authority. And obviously, in this particular case, the board has already approved the $6,000 expenditure. But I am concerned that, particularly over the next couple of months, that similar things may come up, that it's just better for the district if they can be approved, and yet it may be difficult to convene a quorum. Obviously, if we have more flexibility, if it's an emergency and human life or property is in danger, there are a number of different things that we can do. I'm thinking more of a day-to-day situation. There's the public works example. There is the more dangerous but still not extreme or dire emergency example of a tree that starts to look sick. And perhaps we need contracts with an arborist to address that issue before the board can convene. There are a host of things that I can imagine could come up. And again, it's conceivable that if illness spreads throughout our community, it may become even more difficult than usual to convene a quorum.
So Anne, as this is written, does that mean that we're just upping the spending authority up to 20,000? If it's needed to be done before the board can convene a meeting, it's not predicated on a state of emergency?
It's not predicated on a state of emergency, but it is predicated on the issue of whether or not you can convene a board meeting.
Right.
So if the interests of the district require that we engage an arborist to do some work on trees that look like they're sick, and we can't get a quorum because perhaps one board member is ill, another one has an ill family member, and a third has an issue at work that won't let him get free, then this would allow Tony to, or whoever his successor is, to engage the arborist and get that work done.
Right.
Chris?
Sylvia?
I have felt for a while that the $5,000 limit was actually a bit low. And so I wonder, two things. One is if whether or not we could, and Anne, you could answer this, whether in this motion, we could change the usual limit to $10,000 and then continue with the notion that if a board meeting could not be convened, would allow him or her to go over the limit up to $20,000 if a board meeting could not be convened.
Well, I have to be honest, I have never seen the 5,000 written down. It's been established, I believe, as a matter of practice. Director Natoli told me that she believed that she'd seen it in the Policy and Procedures Act. Our Policy and Procedures Manual, but I was not able to find it. I was going to, you've stolen my thunder a bit. I was going to suggest to the board that at some point in the not too distant future, we come back with exactly what you suggest, a policy that A, increases the general spending authority, but also addresses emergency situations like this, because we should be prepared in the future. This is a omission in our current set of policies that we should address.
Is there any reason we can't amend or create the resolution now and then still come back with a more formal policy and procedure, but do as I suggested, which is to change the limit to $10,000 now, and then continue, like I said, with the 10 to 20 if the board cannot be convened? Because honestly, I'm in healthcare now, and your scenario is actually not at all improbable. It is very probable that 2 to 3 people could be so ill they could not be part of this call, given the rates of transmission and the severity of the illness for many people.
I'm going to recommend that we come back with a permanent increase of 10,000. I am not sure what the Policy and Procedures Manual, I don't recall it being addressed in there. However, we didn't agendize that action.
Okay, that's
fine. In any event, I think it would make sense to come back with that.
Well, we probably want to make sure that it's not a policy hidden somewhere, because then we would be modifying the policy. So
absolutely.
I also
would actually like to draft a section of the Policy and Procedures Manual that addresses spending authority and addresses emergency situations.
So that would just codify what item 3 is we're talking about today.
That or something similar, whatever the board decides to do, I think we should codify.
Any other questions about this?
Where did $20,000 exactly come from? That value.
Well, I seem to remember that there was a tree contract that was somewhere in that neighborhood. It may have been actually more than that, but I assumed that because hopefully we'd still be able to reach Chris and Rochelle by phone, that 20,000 was a reasonable number. It would allow for a lot of tree work to be done.
You may want to, in light of everything, you may want to not specify, to limit it to the president and vice president, but to 2 directors, period.
Huh. That's within the board's discretion.
I mean, I'm assuming that we could always be reached by phone. And
You could say, in a case of emergency, the vice president and president, and if neither or either one is not available, at least 2 members of the board. Because it's true, if this is take an earthquake scenario and 2 people are not reached because lines are down or whatever.
Yeah. That would be, I think certainly the permanent policy should have even more plan Bs. The question is really, what do you want to do tonight for the non-codified? Like to say something along the lines of, you know, if one or both are not available, then any 2 directors. That would be a reasonable motion for the board to consider.
okay.
Yes.
All right.
Yeah. Did Catherine have her hand raised before?
Yes.
She's muted.
I'm trying to unmute her. Catherine, can you, there you go.
The point I just wanted to make, I don't know, you know, about the spending limit, but during this time of emergency, you know, if one of us got sick and we had to not work for a long period of time, you know, even if it's a month or 2 months, you'd need to have replacement, and the replacement costs could be, they would probably exceed $5,000 depending on how long that would be. And, you know, or the general manager, or, you know, whoever it is. So, and then also another thing to think about is just general protective gear. You know, some of that could end up getting really costly if there's low supply. The costs are just going to go, you know, up and up. And if the police need good protective gear, you know, that could be another cost. So those are just you know, things to think about during this time of emergency.
I agree that the 5,000 cap should be raised a bit, or, you know, should be raised given the situation. I'm not arguing against that. I'm just trying to understand where the exact numbers and what the plan, like what the calculus had been.
Well, unfortunately, we're all speculating as to what the worst case scenario might be. And we just don't.
Catherine raised a really good point, though, that even just, for example, someone falling ill in the office and needing to hire a temp would allow, that amount of money would allow for, you know, a couple of months of salary, for example.
Do we have any public comments?
Well, I was going to make sure that there's no board. Everybody on the board is okay? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, we do have one public comment. See if I can make this happen. Pat, I'm going to try to unmute you.
Thank you.
There you go. I think you can talk.
Yes, I just have a couple of questions. One, the new policy manual is in place now, right?
Well, it is certain sections. We still don't have a new financial policy manual.
Okay, I just wondered, since we hired a consultant to do that, whether that person had suggested a particular policy for this type of situation, if it's really a common thing to include in the policy manual. So rather than flying by our own instincts, maybe whoever the professional was who wrote the manual might be able to give some idea of how this should be written. I also think, and this is just the lawyer in me, state of emergency might want to be defined a little more thoroughly than it is. Is it one declared by the government? Is it whoever thinks it's a state of emergency? I mean, what is the state of emergency? Doesn't that need to be more fully defined? Because in our town, $20,000 is a lot of money, right? I mean, it's not necessarily a lot of money in other places, but that's a lot of money in our fragile budget. So I would think, I fully support the idea that we need some kind of a safety net here and some kind of a plan B, but I would hope that there'd be a little more thought put into the words that are used, and I'm sort of with Cyrus on the amount. Is 20,000 enough? Should it be 3,000? Should it be 10,000? It seems like there ought to be some methodology other than maybe that's what it costs to replace a tree.
Anne, did you want to say something?
Of course, I can speak to a couple of those issues if the board if the board wishes.
Please.
First of all, none of the powers are really triggered by a quote unquote emergency. We could do that and then we'd have to define emergency, but it really is a question of, does the district need, or would it be desirable for the district to do X before we can reasonably convene a meeting? So it's really a question, it's triggered more by whether the district should do something, A, and B, whether we can convene a meeting in time. That's one point. The other point is this process started with the California Special District Association model, and the consultant tailored it to what he believed were the needs of this district, but he didn't add new sections. I added some new sections, and there'll be more new sections coming, but the model that we started with didn't address this issue. And now I suspect that we are not the only ones who are realizing that this is an issue that should have been addressed. So I can look for models that are out there, to the extent that there are. Probably cities have them. In fact, I know that cities have them because I drafted one for Tiburon. So we can find some samples to go by, but that is just an explanation of why the policies that we've already adopted haven't addressed this.
Okay, Lisa, let me see if I can unmute you. Lisa?
Am I unmuted?
Yes, I hope so.
Okay, if you can hear me, that's good. This kind of piggybacks on that. I guess my question was, does the district itself have to declare a state of emergency? And once it does so, then other things kick in, like the increase in expenditures and waiving of certain other factors as part of that process that would then be able to take place. So I'm just wondering, maybe Anne, you're the best person to answer this, isn't that more of a typical outline of how things proceed, or does the state of emergency just cover everybody in the whole state?
Good question, actually. And I had to look this one up because the general manager asked me the very same question. As it happens, special districts cannot declare a state of emergency. Cities can, and it triggers certain things. Counties can, and it triggers certain things. But when the county declared a state of emergency, that covered all of the unincorporated area in the county, which would include Kensington. So right now, I don't see any reason for the county to do, obviously, the board can declare a state of emergency. It is a state of emergency, but that wouldn't have any legal effect that I've been able to find because we're covered by the county's declaration.
So Anne, I guess the confusion is, are A and B standalone provisions, or do they only exist while we're in a state of emergency?
Well, I had contemplated that they would only exist while this current crisis was ongoing, but I didn't write it that way, and there was a reason for that, because we really don't know how long people will be sick after the state of emergency is lifted. Again, the key point is, can the district convene a meeting of the board of directors? We can revoke this as soon as we think that it's kind of back to business as usual, but I'm still concerned that irrespective of whether or not there's a current declaration of emergency, there may be a period where sickness is pervasive, even if the number of new cases has plateaued, and it's difficult to convene a meeting. If the board wants, of course, it can cabin the period of time with reference to either the governor's or the county's declared state of emergency. and that would not be uncommon.
But the intent of this proposal is not to, again, predicate it or have it enclosed only in a state of emergency. The text for that starts it all is just to explain the reasoning that you came to this conclusion that we need this authority, and you could imagine other instances beyond the state of emergency.
That's correct. And another alternative for the board would simply be to say that these powers shall, be in effect for 6 months unless extended or revoked earlier, or some other period of time. The board has discretion to do any of those things.
Okay. But as at least written or intended, this is not only in a state of emergency.
No, it's
Okay.
not.
Okay,
But the board could, again, cabin this authority.
Sure.
We have other.
Yeah, I'm getting there. Joanna? Joanna, can you unmute yourself?
Am I unmuted now?
There you are, yes.
Great, great. Thank you. And I want to start out by thanking all of you. I think handling public service at times like this is enormously stressful. And we really owe each of you a real debt of gratitude in carrying the water through this. My question is really about a review process as we're lifting a cap. Sounds like a very sound recommendation that we want to have more flexibility. And obviously, whoever the general manager is, you have to be able to function on a day-to-day basis and in emergency situations. And I think, Anne, that your point is certainly well taken, although we hope at the same time that we will all remain safe and well, but that may be a bit much. So the question I'm having is really, is there something on record in terms of a policy and procedure for reviewing these kinds of exceptions? And where does that get done? How often does it get done? Where does it get done? And how is it made transparent, both to the board and then to the community? Given, as Pat was saying, that $20,000 is quite a bit for the Kensington budget. It's not chump change.
All right, thank you. And then Gail, let me see if I'm gonna try to get you to.
Wasn't that a question?
Well, I think that's something that we have to take up when we're discussing the.
Like, wasn't
when we discuss the scope of these items, that's something that she wishes us to consider. So let's wait until we discuss it. At least is that how I take it. Gail?
Yeah, am I unmuted?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I guess I'm getting a little confused about how the discussion is moving forward, because my understanding of the agenda item itself was that this was all under the context of some type of emergency situation. And so to make it a little bit more broader and authority for the general manager seems like that's another agenda topic. So I think, as far as I think right now, that it does make sense to have some policy around emergencies where the board can't meet. However, I don't think extending it broadly at this point, I think that needs more discussion and a little more analysis about what the amount might be and when that might be used. Because as other people have said, it's probably rare that the authority for $20,000 is needed. But however, during this current situation, I could see that if it's an emergency that is declared by the county or the state, that would make sense just to get us through this period, and then to determine later on whether there's a broader authority that you want to give the general manager to expend dollars.
So you're in favor of couching that within only a state of emergency right now?
Yeah, I think that would make more sense until you have more time to really look at the types of expenditures that have been needed by the district to figure out what, you know, a dollar amount might be that would make sense, and to maybe formalize it a little bit more under the general manager would be able to do this. And I would think the general manager would want that as well, because, you know, otherwise that leaves them liable. And we've had those experiences in the past where there's been credit card use and all sorts of things that have, you know, become raised issues around expenditure authority.
Okay, thank you. All right, so everyone that asked to talk has talked. So board comments. Cyrus, now you get a chance to maybe, if you want to, talk about some of these things that were brought up.
Well, I'm asking, like, what is the board's answer? Like, what is the type of framework that we are putting in place for review of when you increase the amount of money like that? And like, so first, are we talking in an emergency context, or, which is, I think, what this agenda item was set up in a state of emergency. And I'm going to heavily agree with Gail Feldman that if we want to do something more broad, let's, you know, sort of more set, it's going to be something to come back to later.
Rochelle, did you have something to say?
I do, yes. I think that we should grant this authority to the general manager. I would like to probably put a 4-month period on it and then revisit it, because I think Anne has a good point that the county, we should follow the county state of emergency, but maybe they remove that and yet we still have a hot spot here in Kensington or something where we can't. So I would like to give the authority for 4 months and then perhaps have it expire. But I think that the general manager can bring these items to us. And I'm hoping that there'll be a one-way, I would assume that the GM should do a one-way communication to all board members if they have to spend over the $5,000 limit up to the $20,000 limit. It was a number that was picked because it's large, but not so large that it would negatively or irrevocably do something to our budget from which we think we could not recover. So it doesn't pull alignment. $20,000 allows for an emergency response, but it doesn't cataclysmically turn our tight budget around. So that's why the number 20,000 seemed appropriate.
So you're suggesting a sort of amendment to this, that A and B are not contingent upon a state of emergency, but they have a 4-month sunset period, essentially.
Yeah, I'd like a 4-month sunset. And I mean, I do want it to be an emergency spending that we cannot, because we cannot convene a meeting. That is why the GM is, or it's an item that must be acted on today in terms of safety equipment or something like that, or a tree or car repair or something that must occur before we can convene a meeting.
I like this idea in the sense that 4 months gives us time to probably not necessarily get through this period, because I think, you know, there could be, this is an ongoing issue. It could last, frankly, a year, where there could be continuous sickness. But I do think that 4 months gives us time to then create the more formal policy that Anne was talking about. So I like this idea, but I think that it works. And I think there is something to be said for the fact that it's in the interest of the district, it's urgent, and for some reason the board cannot be convened, and most likely that the board cannot be convened, it is some kind of an emergency.
I think, Eileen, you wanted to talk? I'll unmute you. There you go.
Yes, I think that's an excellent idea. It could also be renewed in 4 months if we haven't had a chance to meet. But I want to echo Vice President Chair Swatt's suggestion that there be a one-way communication with the item sent to all board members so that we're aware of what the item is or items. Because our budget is very tight, it would be very helpful to have that.
And that would be, I guess, sent within a day, 2 days, or something like that. We'd have to specify that probably.
I don't know that we can, I don't know that we need to specify. I mean, it's going to come in the transmittal form,
Right.
but within 2 weeks. But the only reason I don't want to specify that they must do it within a day or two is if it's a true emergency, let them handle it, and then
Right.
they-
Lines could be down. It could be not possible to email.
Right.
So,
Okay.
and it would also be in the GM's report. It would be in the transmittal. It would be in the, you know, in the financial statements of the district. It wouldn't, you know, there should be no way that it's hidden per se.
Right. Well, I like the 4-month extension also. Seems to make sense, and I think that it makes it a lot simpler than trying to figure out what a state of emergency means. And obviously, even if it's taken up, there might be other times when it's really important. So, all right. So, do I have a motion? I'd like to make a motion.
I think we have one more comment and then.
Oh, Joanna. Okay, sorry. Well, we already had public comment, so that period has ended. So any board members would like to make a motion?
I will.
Okay.
I make a motion that the board grant the general manager spending authority up to $20,000 if the interests, of the district require an expenditure in excess of his usual $5,000 limit before the board can convene a meeting. We also authorize the general manager to make expenditures in excess of $20,000 with the concurrence of the president and vice president of the board if the interest of the district such an expenditure if the board before the board can convene a meeting. And we do this with a 4-month limit, which would place us that it expires. I would like to extend it to July 31st, 2020, with the understanding that the general manager, as soon as possible after incurring such an expenditure for the district, will alert all board members via one-way communication.
I'd like to make a friendly amendment. I think we wanted to add that if the vice president and the president weren't available, then just two members of the board could approve that. Is that?
Please, yes, yes. Thank you.
Do I have a second on that?
I'll second that motion.
All right. Director Madavi?
I mean, hesitantly, because I don't like the fact you've lumped A and B together, because I agree with the part of A, but I'm going to say the part of B I'm not very comfortable with.
By A and B, do you mean 1 and 2?
Well, it appears on the agenda as two like subparts.
But your vote is still yes?
Yeah.
Okay. Rochelle?
Yes.
Eileen?
Yes.
Sylvia?
Aye.
And I vote yes, so it passes 5-0. Thank you. All right, now we're on to item 4, and that is authorize the retention of Bill Lindsay as interim general manager. And if the need arises to appoint another interim general manager before the board can convene a meeting, authorize the president and vice president to appoint another individual as general manager for a maximum of 2 months at a salary equivalent to that paid to Mr. Lindsay. Who's better, Tony or Ann, to talk about this?
Well, I covered it briefly when I went through the entire agenda report. I can say again that there's a certain amount of uncertainty in our current general manager situation with PERS. Some of that uncertainty was ameliorated by the PERS circular, which relaxed certain restrictions of employment of a retired annuitants, but not all of it. It wasn't specific as to Tony's situation. And that circular will expire as soon as the state of emergency is lifted, which might not give us much notice. So given those two facts, I thought it wise to provide for the retention of Bill Lindsay, who has an extensive experience as a general manager, so that we don't get caught without a general manager. And if for some reason because I know Bill Lindsay is not interested in a long-term situation. If for some reason there needs to be a replacement of Mr. Lindsay before the board can convene, again, that the president and vice president would have the authority to retain another general manager for up to 2 months.
Tony, you know Bill a bit, you've talked to him, do you have anything to say?
Yes, I do. I think it's the district should not be put in a situation of uncertainty about the future related to the general manager position. And I think that the district is fortunate that someone with Mr. Lindsay's background and high reputation is available. So I think it would be best if I resigned my position per the PERS letter, which it indicates should be done by March 31st, and that Mr. Lindsay should be appointed the general manager as of April 1st. And I would assist Mr. Lindsay in any way he asked. I've had some conversations with him already, but my role was switched more to assist the district. I feel kind of caught off guard a little bit because I don't like leaving the district in this time of crisis, but my staying could cause even more uncertainty and instability. So I think the best course of action for the district is to go ahead with my resignation at the end of this month, as PERS has requested, and appoint Mr. Lindsay as the general manager. And then I would work as, I would continue working in the background to assist his orientation to the district and any other ways that he felt appropriate.
All right, any board questions, clarifications?
I mean, why should two directors have the authority to appoint a general manager on their own? Like, we're a board of 5, and that's actually one of those few critical decisions we make together.
I believe, and this goes to the problem that Tony's situation really brought up. Tony's is unusual, but there's a typical or classic hit by a bus situation. We're required to have a general manager by law.
Okay, so like, I mean, that's Bill Lindsay is separate from the second part of that.
Yes.
And realize it's the same issue, which is if we cannot convene a meeting, if there is an impossibility for some reason of convening a board meeting, which is very rare.
Well,
I mean, like that has to be very couched in whatever you're saying, that it's, you know, in the fact that you cannot, like for some emergency or illness reason, you cannot scrounge together a quorum, but otherwise I would not say that you should give 2 board directors that authority on their own.
Okay, so what it says is that if the need arises to appoint another interim before the board can convene a meeting, and for instance, we have to approve a contract with Bill, which I believe can only do at a regular meeting. There's only certain things we can do at regular or special meetings. We might not be able to convene even a special meeting. So this is just if the need arises to appoint, and that's really to cover the district. We need to have a general manager. It's not a situation that anyone would want to do or get into, but it's actually a hole in the district's policy. It's probably been there forever, but not taking into consideration what happens if there's an emergency and we need a general manager and we just can't convene a meeting. We have to have a general manager.
If we hadn't been able to,
an option.
If we hadn't been able to convene this meeting and Tony had to resign on March 30th, what would we have done?
Right.
Well, we knew about this before the last
regular
meeting.
Well, this is, go ahead, Rochelle, yes. I'm sorry. Let me unmute you. There you go.
And then I also want to say, okay, Eileen had her hand raised. We've had our hand raised for a while. Can you see that?
But it was because I had raised it before and forgot to lower it. So
okay, but I'm just a little bit confused about the form because we have people jumping in and I would be very helpful if only President Deppie were controlling the meeting and noting when people, it would just be helpful.
Okay.
So what was I was going to speak on the fact that I don't believe that 2 board members should appoint a general manager. That's, I mean, really awful policy in general. I think that we should have, if it that if we're in the midst of a pandemic, if we must, we're not going to be able to convene a quorum, I think that we should identify at least a time period for which we cannot hold a meeting if we're allowing 2 board members. And they won't necessarily, I mean, I think fall to the president and vice president if they're ill and not able to participate. I think that it should be that we can't convene a meeting for, 30 days or something. I mean, I think we're allowed to, if Bill Lindsay or someone else is unable to fill the position, and then we cannot convene a meeting for a time period. But I don't want it that, oh, hey, unfortunately, Mr. Lindsay must leave, and we know we can't convene a meeting for a week and a half, that somehow that authority falls to 2 board members. No, that seems ridiculous.
Well, I mean, Anne, you can talk to this, but I think the general gist of this is that if we need a general manager and we can't convene a board meeting in time to appoint a general manager, then this is when this kicks in. So I think putting a time period on it, I'm not sure it's necessarily time, it's just a matter of need. If we absolutely have to have a general manager and we can't convene a meeting before the time that we need the general manager, something has to be done. I don't know if we didn't, what kind of situation we would be in, but I think all this is saying is that if we need a general manager for whatever reason, hopefully it's an emergency, and we can't convene a meeting in time to appoint one, then we've got a procedure in place that takes care of that. And Anne, am I reading that correctly?
Yes, I am concerned that if, and this is a nightmare scenario that can happen at any time. Your general manager gets hit by a bus.
Mm-hmm.
Now, normally you would scurry and appoint an acting and then start a search, but that would require some board action. And I would not like to see the district go 30 days without a general manager, particularly not right now, but in any event. So,
well, what happens if, do you know what the law says if we're required to have a general manager and we don't? What kind of state are we in?
Well, I don't.
What we have done in the past is appointed the chief of police as interim general manager.
Well, that would be at a meeting though.
Yeah, which is a terrible idea.
I understand. I'm just saying what we've done in the past.
Well, I don't think we ever had a hit by a bus situation in the past. We've had general managers leave pretty quickly.
I thought there was a succession system that like the CFO was effectively acting.
That I think would be the acting. I agree with Cyrus.
Is that official?
I don't know. I don't recall offhand. We could do that.
I mean, that's probably a good idea to have a succession line, just because overnight you have to do something.
Yeah, so that would mean that, right, temporarily Catherine would become our general manager, and then we would move to appoint a new.
I believe Catherine's hand is up.
Yeah.
She's
she doesn't get to say no. Okay, go ahead.
Mute her. No.
Pesky 14th Amendment or 13th.
Before you guys were going to say that, a suggestion that I was going to have was that for this person, that if somebody had to be elected as an interim general manager because there's an emergency and they have to be elected, just the president and vice president are the ones choosing, could you just make it so that it's like, say, a 2-month or a very short contract, so that you have that interim person and you put a time limit on that, and then you can get everyone else to weigh in. But
That's
if you put a time limit on the,
that's what it says, 2 months.
is it 2 months? Okay, I didn't see that.
Yes, maximum 2 months.
Oh, okay. Oh, I do see that. Sorry.
Tony?
Most organizations do have a succession plan, and it's not unusual, but Kensington is small. And one thing you could do is do both. You could select someone to step in temporarily in the role of general manager and still seek someone to fill the position in an acting capacity. So you're covered, you have an extra layer of security that way.
So you're suggesting just adding to 4, not changing it.
Correct, correct.
Okay. Let me take some public comments and then we can come back and see if we can craft a motion that will solve some of these problems. I see, one hand. Pat, I'm going to try to unmute you. I believe you should be able to talk.
Thank you. So
Okay.
I'm going to agree with Michelle and Cyrus here. I think they're absolutely right. And just to bring a little bit of realism into this, let's just assume somebody gets hit by a bus and you have to replace a general manager. You're not going to be able to do that in one day, no matter what. It's going to take some time to find someone who can replace the quote unquote general manager. So I like the idea of a succession plan and also of having some time built in to choose a general manager where the whole board can participate if possible. I also find the language a bit sloppy here. Before a board meeting can be convened, I don't know what that means, before a board meeting. It seems like in this particular instance, where we're talking about a general manager who now may have the authority to spend $20,000 of our money, that first of all, you need more than 2 people to approve that person. And secondly, it needs to be because it is impossible for the board to meet, or some more descriptive language of when this would be triggered, because before the board can convene a meeting is just too broad, in my opinion. I thought it was too broad in the other one as well. But in this instance, I really think it's too broad. So I'm with Rochelle and Cyrus on this one. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I think Lisa, I'm going to try to unmute you. Can you talk?
Yes, I can talk. Thank you. I also have some problems with this. I do agree with Rochelle and Cyrus on the issue of just 2 people on the board making this decision when, you know, you can call an emergency meeting in 24 hours and you're all here today and, you know, hopefully we'll all be here tomorrow. So, you know, I think that that decision is really a full board decision and that person reports to the full board, and that's really important. The other thing I'm really concerned about, though, is that it implies in this, you know, authorize the retention of Bill Lindsay, great guy, done great things. I'm with you on that. As the interim general manager, it sort of implies that that deal's already been made. And then if the need arises, appoint another interim general manager to be paid the same as what you're paying to Lindsay. So it sounds like that one would be for 2 months. So I'm not sure if it's Lindsay for 2 months or Lindsay and then somebody for 2 months. And then there's no reference whatsoever to what this person would be paid, but we're paying them the same as what we paid Lindsay. So having a report like this that has no financial implications tied to it, so that we have no idea of what the implications of it are to the district, is very concerning. And I feel very strongly that any item that has an expense that could be significant, that does not have the finances tied to it, is negligent and needs for the board and for the community to understand what the implications of that would be.
So I'm going to jump in on that. Am I correct? Because so Catherine had mentioned that her understanding was that this would be $95 an hour like Tony. Am I correct in that that's what the pay is here? Or because that actually needs to be, I think the Brown Act's like that needs to be done at a regular meeting, the compensation.
Well, that's what we're doing at this meeting, yes. Rochelle? Oh, sorry. Wait a second. Oh, come on. All right, go ahead.
Okay. So I think it's a matter of being a little inside baseball. I think we all assumed, and that's probably what happened with this report, that because we're bound by CalPERS rules that we had to follow what Tony was paid. So therefore that's what Bill had to be paid, which in turn was what any successor to Bill had to be paid. Tony or Ann, please correct me if I'm making
No, that's absolutely right.
Yeah, so I think that's where we got off track here. So apologies for the confusion in that was the fact that everybody, it's consistent, it's fiscally consistent. So
I mean, I had to ask that, and I was waiting till we got to that point to just confirm that, but since it was brought up, I had to like
sorry,
ask.
that was just something that was unfortunately understood by myself and others, and Ann and Tony, and maybe the other board, some other board members, and wasn't
No.
clarified in the agenda. I think the other idea with the succession plan, it should be separated. This is the idea that my idea to understanding is that we are going to consider the possibility of appointing Bill Lindsay, but we're also accepting the reality that unfortunately something catastrophic, or hopefully less than, or something situational may happen to Bill Lindsay, and he may need to depart the department before we have found a permanent general manager replacement. Therefore, we would need to have a successor rather quickly.
When that successor then.
Cyrus, wait a second. So we have one more public comment. Let's get the public comments out of the way, and then we can finish the board discussion. Sorry.
Lisa, does that answer your questions?
I'm sorry, Cyrus, you're not the board president. So I think you need to, if you raise your hand and ask.
I'm going to unmute Gail here. Gail, can you talk?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Okay. So this is back to the succession planning, and I think that is really crucial for a small district. And so that needs to be done. But I would just say that as far as payment or salary setting for that role, oftentimes people work out of class in local jurisdictions. It's not that they get the salary necessarily of the person they're replacing. So that should be looked at. I don't know that you can even make that decision tonight based on what your agenda item is, but typically you would increase the salary, but not necessarily to the level. So for instance, if it were, and Catherine, I'm sorry, I don't know you, but if it was Catherine's salary, you might increase it and give it like a 10% out of class salary to fulfill the position of general manager while you're in this sort of crisis mode. It's obviously a temporary situation. And then you would go through your recruitment process of whatever that would look like. You'd have time. There's no organization, there's no state agency that's going to come after the district if you say somebody is your general manager, whether it's your police chief or your financial person. If you feel that that person is competent to steer through for you get your act together to bring in a general manager through a different process, that would make sense. So I feel like you're kind of like overreacting to a situation right now that really what you need to do is you need to, if Tony really needs to leave in the next couple of days and bring somebody on, figure out what the salary is that you're going to pay that person, and then, figure out what your contingency plan is if Tony leaves. Maybe you appoint somebody for 2 months to fulfill that position while you look for your next general manager, but it should be done by the full board, and you should have the option for being able to decide what the salary is going to be for that person. Suppose they don't want to come on at the salary that you're paying Tony. So you have to have your options open for that. Thank you.
All right, let me see if, okay, I'm going to let the phone call or the phone number ends at 6630 talk. Go ahead.
Hi, this is Cindy Ma. Yeah, I just wanted to echo the concerns of the last two public comments. I feel that it sounds very rushed that the board would be making these decisions about suddenly Tony needing to leave and then having an interim GM and then just for a short amount of time and then having another GM and having all of these decisions being made in a potential emergency situation. It feels very unstable to me to be having to rush these kinds of decisions, especially given you just passed the motion to sort of give an emergency GM kind of an unlimited budget. It's very concerning to me, both financially and as well as in the stability of leadership in the town. Even given that the GM position is new to Kensington, we have managed in various other capacities. I don't think that it's wise to to have to rush this decision. I think that, you know, there could be other emergency measures in this particular case of Tony needing to leave early, and I think the board should just plan for that instead of a rush decision about how this GM position would be filled. Thank you.
All right. Okay, so I'm gonna just have some board discussion. I think raise your hands if you want to talk. Rochelle is first. There you go.
Well, I do see that.
I'm sorry, Sylvia, you've had your hand up for a while. Can I just put you back on mute, Rochelle? And, yeah.
Sure, that's fine. Thank you. Yeah, I guess my concern that I have is that there is no contract here for Bill Lindsay. And so I had no assumption that what he would be paid. I didn't know for sure he was under CalPERS, although I know he's a retired, you know, civil servant. Some places have different systems, and there is the potential that at some point we could get somebody who is not under CalPERS. So the rules, you know, those rules are always interesting, but the next interim general manager or the next permanent general manager could come out of the CalPERS system potentially. So the motion here is to authorize his retention, but there's no contract. So I'm a little concerned about how that's going to work, and I would like and for clarification for that. And on the other matter, I could see the case arising that we appoint Mr. Lindsay and then he falls ill. So it's not out of the realm of possibility that something could happen. And again, it would have to be under really urgent circumstances that the board could not convene a meeting, for example, for 30 days if it was that long. So I'm all for, I think this is just is a case of really trying to plan out for the eventual scenarios. It might be good to be a little more specific, but my immediate question and concern, if Anne could answer, is there is no contract here. So how is that going to work?
Go ahead.
So I will speak to that. You know, unfortunately, given all the circumstances, I was not able to put together a contract in time for this meeting. However, I would put the contract that we discussed would be essentially modeled on Tony's contract, both as to the cost and as to the other provisions. So that's the answer to that. I am very concerned about the possibility of being without a general manager. And the reason I am is because right now, I don't know that there is anybody on staff at the district who would be able to absorb both Tony's duties while still continuing to do their own. You know, I'd have to let Catherine speak to whether or not she'd feel comfortable doing that. Steve can speak for himself, but I think it could be a considerable problem. Even, you know, aside from I am not honestly terribly worried about the Attorney General suing us because we are without a general manager for a few weeks. I'm concerned about getting the district's work done.
Wait a second. Sorry, Sylvia. Go ahead.
So on the issue of a contract, though, let's say we kept it all pretty much like Tony's. I mean, that's fine, but don't we have to vote on that at a regular meeting?
Yes.
This is a regular meeting.
But we're not voting on a contract. There's no contract.
You don't have to vote on the contract if you authorize Chris and Rochelle to do the retention. So you could authorize them to enter into a contract on behalf of the district that is essentially similar to Tony's contract.
I think she's talking about Bill Lindsay right now.
I am.
And I'm saying they could authorize you and Rochelle to retain Bill Lindsay using a contract that is essentially the same as Tony's contract. You could do that if the board authorized you to do that.
Okay, thank you.
And by the way, I believe Bill Lindsay is in attendance if you wanted to speak to him about any of this.
No, that's fine. Thank you.
Okay.
So Rochelle, you can talk. Go ahead.
Okay.
Sorry. Wait a second. This
technical difficulties.
Yes, go ahead. Yeah.
Is that good? Okay. I want to speak to the issue of rushed. The fact is that this has come at us like for everybody, like a freight train. I mean, we found out about CalPERS maybe March 10th, and then took a few days, I think, to absorb it. It was sent, the whole board received it at the same time. And I know that President Deppie has scrambled to come up with a solution and be able to present something tonight. I know that we're all working with adjusting our living situations and moving relatives from various locales. So as we kind of batten down the hatches. So to say that this is rushed is true, but we had no other option. This is not anyone trying to get out of doing work. Now, in terms of Bill Lindsay's contract, I think that we should, authorizing either Chris and myself or Ann Danforth to execute a contract is the way to go at the same salary along the same terms as General Manager Constantoros has. I think that it would be of my opinion that what we should do in terms of succession is bring that back, and that we hope that we can have a meeting in April. We don't know, but I think with the fact that we can hope that if needed, General Manager Constantoros could either step in or be there as a backup until we can have another regular meeting at which we can present a succession plan. That might be optimal. And I wanted to say that unfortunately, this is not the ideal in any way. It's not the way in which we wanted to see Tony leave us. It's not the way we want a new general manager to come in, but this is what we're dealing with. And I think we just need to do it as methodically as we can and hope that we can all regroup in the next week or two and then present material and decisions in a more fulsome way.
Eileen wanted to speak. Eileen?
Yeah, what I'm wondering about is if Bill Lindsay even needs to be an employee, or, I mean, I want to just emphasize that I totally agree with Vice President Chair Swat and the timing on this. We are in a world-shattering event right now, but would it make things easier if we retain Bill as in his capacity as a consultant, as acting general manager? Do we actually need to have him as a district employee?
Anne, can you speak to that? Let me wait a second. There you go.
I don't know that we have to, but we have to have, the same question comes up as to a contract. We have a model contract with Tony's. I don't have a consultant contract that would cover retaining him as a consultant.
Yeah, I was just trying to see if there was a way to make this easier, that's all. And
we need a contract either way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Catherine, wait a second. Let me finish with the board. Sylvia, you have your hand up? Do you want to? Go ahead. Oh, wait a second. Okay, go ahead.
Hold on. I just wanted to ask about, Tony's offer to help, and if that is something that, would be require a contract as well, or if that's sort of as advice and consent as necessary without a contract needed and just through the goodness of his heart.
That's really up to Tony.
Okay.
Well, I also believe that if it was on a limited basis, that would be under the new general manager's spending authority, because that would be business of the district. If it was just a minor amount, I would think that that would be an acceptable expenditure for a general manager.
I don't know whether the CalPERS issues also matter in that case.
I think we'd have to go to CalPERS for that. I would expect that they would give us a verbal okay for a limited amount of time, but getting them to translate their verbal okays to writing is difficult.
And time consuming.
Yes.
Is that okay, Sylvia? Sorry. Okay. Catherine, you wanted to say something.
I was just going to say that the independent contractor laws have really tightened up this year. So we'd have to make sure if whether, if you wanted to hire Bill Lindsay as a consultant, we'd have to make sure that he
Right.
falls under those rules. And then also if Tony's being paid outside as an independent contractor, we have to make sure also for that, so that both of those fall under these new guidelines. So that's just a consideration.
All right. Cyrus, you're on.
So I'm just going to say that this entire motion, how it's being discussed, is like completely convoluted. Like these are two separate things. One is Bill Lindsay's retention, and the other is this power of two directors to appoint another general manager. So that really has to be taken as two separate motions, and I'm going to say that now.
All right. So we've had the public talking. Do I have a motion? I think we've talked enough. Anybody have a motion? Sylvia, you have your hand up?
I don't.
Oh, you didn't lower your hand. Okay. All right. Rochelle?
Uh-huh. Oh, okay. I'm unmuted here. Excuse me just a moment while I get the document off my device here. I apologize because I want to have the language. I would like to authorize that the board approve the retention of Bill Lindsay, as interim general manager, with a contract to be approved by the president and vice president and crafted by Ann Danforth, with salary not to exceed the current salary of general manager Constantoros.
All right, do I have a second or any discussion on that motion? Any seconds on that motion? Sylvia, you second?
Yes, I second the motion to authorize the retention of Bill Lindsay as the interim general manager.
Using the contract of Tony as a model.
Yes, all the rest of it. I second the motion.
Okay, all right, I'll take a vote. Cyrus?
Aye.
Rochelle?
Aye.
Eileen, see if I can unmute her. Eileen?
Yes.
And Sylvia?
Aye.
And I vote yes, so that passes 5-0. Now, do I have any other motions regarding this matter? Okay. Everybody's unmuted, so I'm assuming they would say something. Great. Well, I think that's it, unless I've missed something. I do see that the next regular meeting is listed as April 9th, 2020. I think given the circumstances, we'll have to see next week if that's feasible or not. I would rather not have any meetings more than we have to under these circumstances and in this format, but I'll discuss it with Rochelle and Bill and I guess Tony, and we'll make a decision by next week if we're going to have a meeting on April 9th. All right, then with that, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everybody, for putting up with this new technology. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Be well.
Yeah, everybody be well.